All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about Derek Carr, why he chose the Saints over the Jets. So let's get into that conversation. Derek Carr did, have a visit with the Jets, and prior to signing with the Saints. But this is what he had to say. He said, "I could have signed with New York." This was on Pardon My Take, the Pardon My Take podcast. He said, "It just wasn't the right time for me. There were still like 4 or 5 teams I had to hear from." I remember sitting there with Robert Saleh, the Jets coach. He said, and he's like, "Look, man, we'd love to have you. It's up to you." But of course, that ended up not happening. And so Carr had already visited with the Saints before. This is in the article on NFL.com. He had already visited with the Saints before he took the trip to New Jersey to meet with Saleh and the Jets. But he ultimately chose Dennis Allen and the Saints. And I'll be honest, I think, there were a lot of Jet fans that wanted Derek Carr. I know, some of my family, they wanted Derek Carr. But when I heard that there was a possibility that um, that they could get Aaron Rodgers, the Jets, I said, just go after Aaron Rodgers. But, people are like, oh, no, it's too much of a head case. I said, well, if I still think he's the best option. Now, that brings up the conversation now. And Hawaiian 50 says, everyone, please don't forget to smash that like button for this legend for all your information. I appreciate that. For all your information, my guy. I appreciate that. And you also said, got another nephew just got drafted in the first round for the Saints. I bet you can guess who it is by the name rolling on the floor laughing. um, but yeah, so no, I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the comments today, really, because I'll be honest. There are times this offseason where it's you're struggling to figure out what are you going to talk about. I mean, we had the draft, we had free agency, we had all these things, but it's just there's really some parts where you're just like, man, it's a slow day, but we're getting closer to the start of the season, well, at least preseason, so that's good. We can see that. That's in sight. But anyways, so again, I just keep going off topic, but do the Jets regret trading for Aaron Rodgers instead of signing Derek Carr? Well, Derek Carr chose the Saints. So Derek Carr was probably the first option. And when that didn't work out and they had a chance to get Rodgers, and they went and did it. Now, again, for me, when you have a guy that was coming off of a year removed from back-to-back MVPs, okay, because there was that 2022 season in between all of this, okay, we can't forget about that. And that was brought up in our production meeting recently. And, before I spoke on the matter, I did say RELAX, but that was kind of a joke. Rodgers had a down 2022 season. His last full season in Green Bay was not an Aaron Rodgers type season. He threw double-digit interceptions. He didn't have a game where he threw over 300 yards, which, I mean, that doesn't happen. But I think there's some factors into that because he had all these like rookie receivers that he had to work with, like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. Like he had to, build a rapport up with them. And I don't want to make excuses for him, but I'm just, throwing that out there. And then also, let's not forget, he hurt his thumb in the London game against the Giants. I think it was on the last play of the game. So there were some factors, I think, that contributed to his down year. And then if you remember, the Packers did get hot towards the end of the year, and they almost made the playoffs, but then, kneecaps and the Lions were like, not so fast. We got nothing to play for, which means you got nothing to play for because we're going to knock you out of the playoffs right now. Which I was kind of upset the Lions didn't make the playoffs in 22 because I feel like they deserved it. But, it's how tiebreakers. Seattle beat them earlier in the season, and that's how they got in. But anyways, and the Lions got to the NFC Championship game last year, so, it didn't take long. But anyways, yeah, 2022 was a down year for Rodgers. But then coming into last year, the Jets, maybe a better equipped team in terms of, the players. We never got to see it. Rodgers was done in 4 plays, and it's been a tailspin ever since. The Jets with the quarterbacks they had to trot out there every week, And just all the extracurricular stuff with Rodgers, I mean, I'm not going to get into it because, but you guys know what I mean. He could have been sworn into office. No, that wasn't going to happen. But it's just, again, when I heard that story, I just, and again, there's no, like, there's no one way or the other with it. Just hearing that, but I think the idea of him playing in a championship game and then also like being sworn into office, like just the thought of all that happening around the same time, like I just thought that was really funny. But yeah, it's Aaron Rodgers is a different dude than he was 10 years ago. I don't know what happened, but it's just that's where we're at now. But anyways, yeah, it's tough because yeah, you could say with everything that's happened, you could say yeah, I mean the Jets should have got Derek Carr. Well, how did we know that Aaron Rodgers was going to hurt himself 4 plays into the season? We had no idea that was going to happen. No idea. And Derek Carr, I mean, he was coming off of a down year in 22 as well. And Derek Carr turns the ball over more than Aaron Rodgers does. Derek Carr would definitely throw interceptions in big games. Look at how he played with the Saints last year at times. He was inconsistent. Rodgers is not a guy that's going to put the ball in harm's way. But yeah, Rodgers was getting older. And you know what? Rodgers, for a while stayed healthy. He was playing. This was the first significant injury for him since, the collarbone when he missed time. Now, it was like the 2018 opener against the Bears he got hurt, and you thought, oh my God, he's going to be out for the year again. But no, that didn't happen. He played. He stayed healthy. So, yeah, you thought maybe, but he's been staying healthy. So I didn't really expect him to, well, maybe expect him to get banged up, but not first game of the year, 4 plays into the first game. But that happened. That happened, unfortunately. And, it's unfortunate. It really is, because you wanted to see what he could do. And we didn't get a chance to see that. But we are going to get a chance to see it this year. I think we have to see how this season goes. Because I think if it ends up being the same as it was last year, where Rodgers goes down early and that derails the Jets' whole season, and then everybody's gone, Joe Douglas, Nathaniel Hackett, Robert Saleh, Rodgers probably gone, then yeah, you would say it's a failure. And you probably should have signed Derek Carr if you had the chance to. But Derek Carr chose the Saints over the Jets. So, yeah, then you probably go back and say, yeah, we shouldn't have done this. But I think it's still early, even though like a lot has happened. In the chat, Hawaiian says, I think the quarterbacks nowadays are having harder time because of the defense of other teams are animals. Well, I mean, it depends on what defense you're going up against, because not every defense is good. I mean, yeah, you go up against like the 49ers defense or, the Steelers or the Ravens, how they were last year, the Browns. Yeah, I mean, you go up against some of these better defenses with these, star players on the defensive line like Nick Bosa and TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. Yeah, it's, but, the reason why Aaron Rodgers got hurt last year was because of the protection. And I don't know what kind of, like, was he in... Well, he had that calf injury, and that could have led to the Achilles injury. But also, I think, because everybody has complained about the turf at MetLife, that could have played a factor. Because if you remember from 2020, the Jets were playing the 49ers, and Nick Bosa tore his ACL. There were a few players that got hurt. A few defensive linemen got hurt in the game against the Jets. Nick Bosa tore his ACL in 2020, I believe. It was like that week. It was week 2. I think it was like early on in the season. But yeah, like players got hurt on that turf. Like many people have complained about the turf at MetLife. But yeah, you got that, and you got the offensive line for the Jets. The protection on that play that Rodgers got hurt on, it didn't. It was horrendous. And we talked about the 49ers and, Rodgers getting hurt. Well, Leonard Floyd, who sacked him on that play that led to his injury, is on the 49ers. And they're going to be playing on Monday night. So, if you're a Jet fan or if you're a Rodgers fan, you're going to be covering your eyes every time Rodgers drops back to throw it because you're like, oh, God, please don't get hit. Please. I can't take it. But I'm just hoping he gets through the first game because I think after that the Jets have a doable schedule. And shout out to TJ who does the sports podcast. He was breaking down the Jets. A lot of things with the Jets actually. Went over their rankings in their categories from last year. Then went over the schedule. He has the Jets going 8-9. I forget what I had the Jets. What did I say? Did I say 11 wins? 11, 12 wins? Around there. So you might look at TJ's prediction of the Jets as being more realistic as opposed to me. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it's too early to decide whether the Jets made the wrong move trading for Aaron Rodgers. I think a lot of people say yes because of how it's gone. Let's see how this year goes, because if he gets hurt again and he's out for an extended period of time and the Jets season goes nowhere, then we could say, yeah, it was a failure. But if the Jets have a good year, they make the playoffs, and maybe go on a deep playoff run, then got to change our tune a little bit. And then as for Derek Carr, I mean, he finished the season strong last year. See, if the Jets got that version of Derek Carr, and I mean, if they had Derek Carr at all last year, playing the full season, the Jets probably make the playoffs. It's just, they didn't have a backup plan when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. So, I don't know. It's tough to decide right now, but that's my thoughts. So, we'll see how Derek Carr does. We'll see how Aaron Rodgers does. And I think this season will define whether it was a failure or not that the Jets traded Rodgers. I'm not going to say it yet because he's playing this year. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people. You have the right to not be optimistic because the Jets have had a rough stretch. It's been longer than a rough stretch, but let's see what happens. It's right there in front of them, as Aaron Boone likes to say. Hawaiian also says, you're right, offensive line. If Steelers had a better one, I think we would have took the Super Bowl. Well, they put an emphasis on the offensive line in the draft, so we'll see. And then he also said, if it was my choice, I would sign 8 big sumo wrestlers for my offensive line for the Steelers. Yeah, but they got to learn the proper technique too when it comes to blocking. I mean, you could be a big guy, but you got to be able to be a little. I gotta have some movement, and I mean, not saying they don't, but yeah. But I agree though. Anyways, so we're gonna take our next break. When we come back, we'll talk about C.J. Stroud. Just some recent comments he made. Going into year 2 as the Texans starter. Talk about what he had to say when we come back from break. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.